Let me start with this one, then I only have to click the big button. Good morning everybody. I'll be speaking English, men jag har lärt mig lite svenska också. I'm coming from the Netherlands, but I worked 10 years in Hungary, Budapest, for Ericsson, a well-known company here. In 2008 I moved to Lund, and since 2016, last year, I'm working for Verisure Innovation. I'm located in Malmö. We do development on our own systems, both in Malmö, Linköping and Madrid. And what I want to talk about today is about how we are currently breaking our monolith down into microservices. And I thought I will not go into technical details, because I know you're interested in that, so I get an invitation for another time as well to talk about that. But today I would like to talk about how we are moving that monolith into microservices and what that means for the organization and how people are thinking and reacting on that. And often, I don't know who of you are working with microservices. Nobody. You know what microservices are? Yeah? So it's okay. If you give that answer, then I'm more than happy. Then I'm on the right wavelength, and then you're coming next. It's a buzzword, yeah. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you why you should do it and why you shouldn't do it. Because actually, in most of the argumentation, it's the wrong choice. Still, we make it. But the first thing I want to say is that if you have a monolith and you decide to break it down because the monolith doesn't scale anymore and your development takes too much of time, it's not a failure. It means you're successful. When we started with the alarm in Verisure, it was very easy. A few people, you buy the software, you buy an alarm center, you buy some salespeople and somebody who's answering the phone. You need to have some permission from the government, then you drive. And then you start growing and growing and growing. And you want to differentiate from competition, so you start to develop your system. But you started with that monolith you bought. So the fact that we run into problems now is really great. We're operating now from Sweden, Finland, Norway up till Spain. We have customers in Chile and Brazil. Yeah? So yeah, of course the system needs to evolve. But as I tend to talk way too much, I'll come with the conclusion. So let's put that on the table first. The main reason to go to microservices is only one thing: to become more agile and improve the performance of your organization. Anybody who tells you something else, in my world, is lying. Now, maybe there are people now starting to say, hey, but, yeah? But I think that microservice only makes sense when you keep this in mind. And at Verisure, we had that, especially the last one, improve the performance, become more agile was great. But then when you get started, when you start to work with engineers, you're forgetting that goal. So the mantra for today is, don't forget why you're doing it. Because a lot of discussions tend to go around things that are very easy to answer if you don't forget what you talk about. Dare to make mistakes. Who of you has ever looked at some code base and said, if I change something here, it will break down there? Everybody, I'm pretty sure. Nobody admits it, but it happens. We have Eric here, my colleague, who's a test coach. It's his task to find that out. It's my task to make him unemployed, because I would like to make it that he has nothing to do anymore. Thank you. So what happens is that you are being taught to be careful. So you end up with code that you don't even remove things. Yeah? So we are taught to be risk aversive when we are coding, when we're making changes in the system. I worked for Ericsson, where we did long studies before we even touched something, just to make sure we didn't break anything. I see a lot of recognition here. When you go to microservice, you can make mistakes. Dare to make those mistakes. And the biggest problem is not the designers, because they love to experiment. It's to get it into management's head. And then the last one, it's not typical. Focus on the service domain. Break out your services from the monolith. Leave your data intact. It's much harder. I'll come back to that. I will talk about different topics that I have collected, and I hope to touch these 3 points. So, we decided to go microservices. 3 months passed, nothing had happened, at least no code was written, and we started to talk about the optimum size of a microservice. So the first thing you do, you go on the internet and you say, somebody has said, the optimum size is what you can feed a team of developers with 2 pizzas. If you have me in the team, then you're really screwed because you get really tiny microservices. But I can create a team where you can really make a huge one. So the discussion comes to be about this optimum size of a microservice. Somebody else said, a smart guy, what you can rewrite in a couple of days. But I'm not writing code to have it rewritten all the time. Why would that be an argument? So go back. A, dare to make a mistake. Pick your size, it doesn't matter. We need to learn. I have said it takes 1-2 years before we finally get a feeling. Pick something small. You'll find out if it's too small, so you make it bigger. You merge 2 microservices into one. Pick something big, you'll find out that's still a lot of work. You will be breaking it down. Dare to make a mistake, learn on the way. It's about making you more efficient. It's not about making the system more efficient. Then we would have taken Erlang or something. How many microservices do we need? Long discussions. IT Ops, 500. Management comes in, I dream about 5,000. Again, find it out. It's not a monolith. To go cloud or not to cloud. Heated discussions. My personal opinion is, if you move from a monolith to microservice, your IT Ops or your DevOps, they stand for a big change. So I would say, if you're already running on your own data center, keep running on your own data center. Move 1 or 2 services into the cloud so you know that you're agnostic to the technology. But don't make it too hard for yourself. Keep the option open. But don't have that discussion initially. It's about optimizing your performance, optimizing the performance of the organization. Why do we do everything in one go? Just don't close the road. And then it's coming. What should we break out from the database first? And I'm pretty sure you do it wrong. We've discussed it 100 of times and we do it wrong. I'm pretty sure about that. Thing is, when you start with a monolith, now I shouldn't say that, I'm coming to another slide with that. Yeah? So the discussion is about breaking out things on the database. But imagine the following. Somebody starts to work with your login services, and he says, oh, it's a really great idea to break out an email address and the password into its own microservice with its own database. Sounds really smart, belongs to each other. Then a few weeks later, the next group comes and says, it's really good to break out user information, contact information, etc. So we break out name, address, email. Wait a second, but we already broke out email from the database, it's down there. And now we have email here. So we have now duplicated our data over the system, we need synchronization. So it's actually a bad choice we made. So don't talk about that. Break out your services first. Leave all the information in your monolithic database. Once you have the services broken out and you have experience with that, then it becomes much easier to make the right choices. But when we do this discussion, nobody remembers why we do it. Because all the argumentation is technical. If we do it that way, it's faster, it's more stable, it's more that. We forget why we do it. We want to be more performance in the organization. I told you it's a mantra in the beginning. I will come back to that again and again. Because we forget it all. I forget it all the time. If you're lucky when you move to microservice, you'll be talking about organizational changes. If you work on a monolith, you probably have at least a 3-tier architecture. You have a data structure on the bottom. which is so bloody complex that you have maybe, if you're doing agile, a scrum team or multiple scrum teams taking responsibility of there. Because anybody else that work on the higher layer doesn't have a clue what's going on there. Then you have a group that takes care of the middleware, very highly specified, specific stuff. Somebody's laughing. You're working on middleware? Very highly specialized. Nobody can touch that. It's my world. And then you have the applications on top, probably different groups. So we go Scrum, we go Agile. We have horizontal teams. We need to coordinate everything, and we lose a lot of that agility. When you go into microservices, you break things out of the database, you simplify it, which allows you now to have a vertical stack responsibility in your Scrum team, which makes your organization much more agile. Does it sound logical? Yeah? Yeah. I mean, I'm not that smart, I'm just repeating other smart people constantly. I just put it together. But then you have a question. We have this organization, this big monolith, and then we break out our first microservice. Yeah, how should we do that? Should we keep our old organization there and try to make this work? Or do we change our organization so that it works nice for the future? But of course, now we have a problem. Because then we have vertical teams, that every team starts to work into the database. That for me is a key discussion, which, like I'm saying, you're happy when you're discussing that. Conway's law says about organizations and architecture are very much alike. I think Eric and I were very lucky. Our management made the bold move to move our systems from the monolith, the organization. They changed the organization to work with the new product, the new architecture, the microservice architecture, before we even wrote a single microservice. A bold move, but I think the right one. If you make the move to microservice, talk about that. Performance. Your product owner, product manager, the first requirement they write down when they come with a new feature is it shall perform the same way as it did before. Yeah, but wait a minute, microservice, API call, HTTP, blah, 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 blah. Network delays all over. It will never be having the same performance. But they never tell the product owner that. They don't tell the customer that it takes a few microseconds more or less. Yeah? So this is often hidden. It's very convenient. Reliability. Yes, microservices can give you reliability. The advantage with a monolith is if something goes down, everything goes down. If microservices, you have chained 10 different microservices, then 10 things can go down. 10 network connections can go down. These 10 microservices can run on different data centers. So you need to really think about that. It's not for free. You pay a price there. These are the things you need to talk about. But it's so convenient to forget them. You can interrupt me with questions or if you disagree or anything. I especially like people disagreeing with me. That's the interesting part. Because I'm not right, this is just my opinion. Point of wisdom. If you have a stable monolith, I know it's an oxymoron, stable monolith, it's really a good starting point. Because one of the hardest things is to know about the boundaries between your domains. How do I group my data? How do I group my services? You probably made the wrong decisions. We made the wrong decisions in our system. But they were probably 90% right. We know what we did wrong. But we still don't know how we can do it 100% right. It's still a learning process. When you look at people, organizations that were successful into moving to microservices, the majority of them come from breaking down a monolith because they know the system. Companies that start to develop a big system from scratch in microservice often fail because they don't have that knowledge. We gather knowledge about our system, about our domains over time. It's not there. You can hire intelligent people, like they tried to do at Verisure with me, but it doesn't mean you get the right architecture. It takes time. I don't have the answers. How do I stand time-wise? I have 15, really great. Then I need to talk slower, actually, or make up more things. Yeah? Talking about the data domain. Yeah? I said one of the mantras was break down your service domain and your data domain later. Why do you think that is? What happens if you do it wrong? One of the things with microservices is that once you deploy them, you have an API that you need to keep stable. That should always be backwards compatible. But it's very easy to introduce a second microservice that's running in parallel with the first one. So you can gradually introduce new functionality or improvements over time by just starting a new version. But when you work with a data source, there's a little design rule that says every microservice, if a microservice has a data source, then it's the only one owning that data source. If you would have two different type of microservices, let's say what I said before, a login service, and you have a user information, personal information service, that both would touch the same database. Then you have coupled those microservices on the data layer. And you do in principle by doing it in the monolith. That means that if you change the schema on your data, you'll have impact in both microservices. And God knows how many other microservices. So the rule is the data source, one owner, one microservice owning it. So from that perspective, it's much easier to refactor microservices, to swap functionality, merge together than data. I'll show you in the next one. Suppose that you have one microservice and you have broken out data from your system. And I always write database, but actually I would like people to start thinking about data source. Because it doesn't have to be a database. The great thing about microservice is that if you need a relational database, you're using a relational database. If you're needing an OSQL database, you're using an OSQL database. If you need a flat file, you use a flat file. So you optimize the database system what you're using. A lot of people often forget as well that we could just run in memory. It's quite okay to start a microservice, download a lot of stuff, and have everything in memory. A lot of data is like that. People start to optimize too early here. So if your service domain was too large, but you broke out your data, then you say, we made a mistake. Great. Vincent said that's okay, make a mistake, learn. So you break it down into two other microservices. But then you need to break your data as well, which might be really hard. Think about the example I had about the email address. And that's a very simple example. So do this, leave this in the monolith. The other way around, you get this kind of things. You have two microservices, but you came to the conclusion that the service domain was actually belonging to each other. So you merge them, you end up with two data sources. Okay, it's easy to put them together, you think. No, it's not trivial. On this image, it's very easy. But in the real world, when I introduce a new microservice, a new version with new functionality, I want to keep the old microservice there, alive. Because if I screwed up something, I would like to take that instance out, and that one keeps running. Yeah? It's a canary deployment. It's called canary deployment. Anybody knows where that comes from? Mines, absolutely. Mine workers, they had a little canary. It's not because they love birds. Yeah? The task of the canary actually was to die. If there's gas leaking out, the canary would die. And the miners know, get the hell out of here. So what you're doing is, if you write a microservice, let's say that one, and we always draw one box, but don't forget you have multiple instances. There's one of these is running in data center A and the other one in data center B. I mean, you don't want your house to be burning down because we are just having a problem in data center A. Yeah? So we're running the same microservice in data center B. So if we introduce something new, we introduce a new version. But we route maybe 1% of all the users to that new version. That way we can test it in the field. That means that we have the old microservice still needing to access the database. So you can't just merge them. This is a problem what you have. You might have an API change, so that maybe you can't get rid of this yet. So on paper, this is very simple. I promised you that to keep it not technical, but a little bit of a teaser of the problems you could go into. Suppose that you just want to rename a column in a microservice. You know what hell it could be in a monolith. But what does it mean in a microservice? You have the old service running. And you said, but login name was wrong. It should have been email from the beginning. So what do? Yeah, first you alter the table and add a column. Yeah? Hoping that your old microservice is written that way that it doesn't crash on the data there. Otherwise you need to do some work there as well. Okay, now we have added a column. Now I have two columns. Then your new microservice reads from the old column and writes to both of them. Still, the new microservice is reading the old data, not the new column. In the next phase, you copy data from the old column to the new column. So they have consistency of the data. In the fourth place, your new code reads from the new column, but writing to both columns. Because your old code is still reading from the old column. The old version is still out there. The code then starts to read and write from the new column. And then you're home free. And then later on you can delete the old column. So in practice means a multiple stage transition from one data structure to another one. And this is just renaming a column. That's why I really urge you, break down the service domain first, take the data domain later. Unless you already have broken that out. If you already have it isolated, take it. There are two references I would like to point to. I know everybody's taking some of the famous authors. These are two books that you can download for free from O'Reilly. Microservice Anti-Patterns and Pitfalls. This talks about 10 different mistakes you can make. A pitfall you discover directly. An anti-pattern, it gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling, but maybe after 6 months you find out you did it wrong. Like actually the breaking down the service and data layer, I told you before I'm not that intelligent, is the first anti-pattern pitfall that this book describes. You can find it somewhere on O'Reilly. You need to just sign up for free and you can get it. And then the other one is migrating microservice databases, which I used as a basis for the last slide what I had. O'Reilly has actually a quite good service where you can subscribe to weekly information about a topic, and then they give you 10 links, 10 URLs coming in once a week to different websites with interesting topics. And quite often there's a free ebook attached to that, so I can recommend that really. This is what I wanted to talk about, but I think if you have questions, I can take a number of them now. And yeah, and otherwise, sorry, and otherwise I will stay after the presentation a bit longer here, and you can ask me some questions.
The part of breaking down the data layer later doesn't really make sense to me, because you're describing that it's really hard to make changes to the data layer. So wouldn't it make sense to try to get it right in the first place?
So I will repeat the question because I'm not sure if the microphone picked it up. You said you disagreed with me. I like that. It doesn't make sense to break down the service layer first. Wouldn't it be better to just do it right the first time? Yes, if I could promise you that it is right the first time how I break it down, I fully agree. But the problem is, I don't know. We've been working 15 years on our code base, and the moment we want to break down, break out data from the system, we're going to have discussions in the team, and there are 5, 6 different opinions on how to break it down. The problem is we don't know what is the best way. And that is a process we had to learn. We thought we knew, but it's not. And even if you know, take it slow. Allow yourself to make the mistake. But I would actually urge you, because I need to go back to my mantra, try it out. Dare to make the mistake. Because microservices are isolated. So if you take a data domain, you break it out. What is the worst thing what can happen? Yeah, you need to do some extra work to correct it, but you learn something. It's really hard to answer your question because it's more an experience what we got. It's easy to stand here and say, this is how you do it and this is how to do it. Always think about the people that tell you how to do things. They say that because they did it wrong. They learned it. There was one professor once in the US, I think a couple of months ago. He wrote a CV with all his failures to stimulate. Because normally you see, oh, I did this, I wrote that book, etc. But he turned it around, he wrote down all his failures to tell his students, like, it's okay to fail. So break it down and learn. And maybe you're really good. And if you succeed, call me, because I'm pretty sure there's a job for you. I hope I answered your question, but it's not a technical true-false answer. Yeah?
How much you say that microservices improve the performance of the organization and the teams? I can see that, but I can also see the other way that you would require, you might require a lot of like development infrastructure in place to get it efficient. Like if you create a lot of services, there's an overhead there that you hadn't before. When you had a monolith, maybe you had just one service, but now you have a lot of them, and maybe you want to do them in the same way, because this is the reasons, or do you see it as each team should kind of determine the way to do their service, so that's not an issue? I mean, there are 2 aspects of it.
Yes. I don't know how much the camera picked up from the question. Nothing. Oof. I will try to paraphrase it. What you say is that microservice as well requires a lot of tools and environment around it. You have this individual development, DevOps, continuous integration, continuous deployment, and at the same time it requires much more hardware, etc. So there is a cost there. Do I state it right? Absolutely. And I actually had removed that slide, because I didn't want to talk into that part. But yes, there is a lot of cost there. Continuous integration is not something you get for free. Automatic testing, etc., deployment is not something you get for free. I've never said that microservice is cheaper from a cost of operation perspective. You should plan with increasing your data center. You need much more hardware from that perspective. There's much more monitoring to do. Instead of one monolith, which you could have a flag, works, doesn't work, or if you're smart, it's going down. Yeah? You have now 500 microservices that all have that status. Now you have tools like Kubernetes, etc., that helps you into maintaining that. So the amount of work on that level is much more. And then you get a discussion like, again, come back to my mantra, microservices being sold is that every team can pick the language they want. Yeah, you can run it on a Microsoft operating system in PHP, and the other team can use Linux with Java, and the third one is using JavaScript, etc. Technically, that's possible. But as an organization, I strongly believe you need to find a balance. Because how agile am I when Group A is writing in PHP, Group B sees that and says, what the hell is that? And then there is a group that thinks that indentations is important because that's affecting semantics. I won't say which language it is, but it's something I don't like. I like strongly typed languages. Yeah? So, should you have that freedom as an organization? For a startup, yes. If you come to a certain size and you want to talk about agility, again, go back to why are we doing it? I think you should limit yourself in a number of techniques. So, yes, you're going to have much more tools, you're going to have much more technology around it to make it work. But I also think you should limit it, otherwise you lose agility in your organization. Again, I hope I answered your question, but at least I give you some input. Yeah, Yannick?
What do you mean by agile?
What I mean by agile, is that important?
Well, you had this word on one of the first slides.
Yeah.
Reason to even do microservices. So yes, I think it's important.
Oh, now I'm going into an area I don't want to go. So the question is what I mean with agile. For me, agile is actually just reacting fast on a changing environment. Being able to take those things that come in and take them fast. What a startup can make it so successfully because they can change and bring out new things really fast, which a big company is having troubles with because you need to go to 5-6 different approval states. Agility means for me that we can do this today and we can do something else tomorrow. That I don't need to go into big meetings and talking about, but we need people that understand that part. But we can't touch the database because those guys are already doing something that is complex. So agile for me and microservice means if that's too complex, that I need to have specific designers working with that. Then agility means that I create microservices that everybody can do because they're small, they're understandable. It might take 1-2 days to understand what it does, but then any smart designer can work with it. So I never have that discussion like who should do it. Ever been in a resource meeting where management comes up or your CEO comes up and says, we have a problem in the field, this needs to be fixed now, who should take it? And then Peter should take it. Another manager, but Peter is working on this case. But we are second for Peter. This is what you get when you have a monolith with very specific things. You recognize it. Yeah, but you're Peter in this example. Yeah? I don't like Peters. Sorry if somebody's called Peter here. And this is what I say to management all the time. Get rid of Peter. Peter's actually a line manager in our case. Get rid of Peter because he's the bottleneck of the organization. And because we don't give this task to other people, they don't learn. I could tie my children's shoes every morning till they're 18 and they still don't know how to tie it. So the best thing to do to them is, oh now you try it yourself. I'll help you, but now you try it yourself. And that is something that is always a constant struggle. So instead of having the organization working hard to spread competence, I like to simplify the system so we don't create Peters. That's for me real agility. But it's my my definition. In the back.
I think that features comes from time constraints rather than complexity. That people, if you are in an organization that are always working on 110%, that's when you get the features, because you never have time to let someone else work with it.
Absolutely. For the camera, features are created because you're working 110%. Time allocation, so there's never time to spread knowledge, etc. And it's absolutely a good point, and I should have maybe stressed it as well. The move to microservice is not for free. It will take actually an investment in the beginning. So we have something that's called super users, which are the different countries that have responsibility for the alarm handling. Yeah? Because they're actually our core. They're the ones that call you when something goes wrong, when you have a fire, it is a burglary alarm. So their role is really important. And I presented microservices to them. I use spaghetti and cupcakes. I can take that maybe another time. But I did so because I wanted to explain to them is that we will be a little bit slower into delivering new functionalities because we're on a learning path. This 110% load you talk about, I've never had that problem, because 110 would be party time. Yeah? It's mostly 150%. Inflow of features are much bigger than outflow. But we explain to our customers, which is internal Verisure, we explain to them is we will be slower in the coming year or 2 years. But then we will be faster. So it's very important to explain to them. And if you move to microservice, your organization needs to understand this. Management needs to, your CEO needs to be behind that you lose space. You can hire new people, but it's not going to cut it. You're absolutely right. The continuous pressure is what creates beaters.
It's kind
Eric.
of an interesting situation at Verisure right now, because we employ 3 different coaches rather than sort of domain experts. And one of the things we do the most is just try to slow people down, I think.
Yeah, Peter is right. When I started last year in May, Eric. Freudian slip. No, actually his name is Peter, but he doesn't want to say that. No, Eric, myself, and a third person were hired by management. Peter is test coach. Sorry, Eric is test coach. We have Susan, who is a UX coach, and I was supposed to be system design coach, but they needed somebody to make decisions, so they gave me head off. But I joked to my manager actually last week, and I said, I hope you didn't count your salary based on my salary based on the number of decisions made, because I didn't make any this far. But it's just sometimes you need to make a decision, and I would be the deciding vote, but we managed to do everything in the team. But Eric is absolutely right. We, as 3 coaches, we're slowing down the organization on certain points. Yeah? Asking the question, why are we doing it? Because running into the wall is never the right way to do it. We can stop things. We can stop things when we say, hey, we have no control here. We can stop things. I've seen situations, you all know it, where the market takes 6 months to decide that they need to have something. And then they come to you, this is urgent, we need it next week. So we stop those things. It's very important. And once you do that, once we as coaches, we do that, people see that, and people appreciate that, and they tell us it's the best thing we had, because we are there. We are not there. Actually, the biggest coaching I do is not towards the team, it's towards management. Yeah. Eric agrees, so great. But of course, he's a great coach. I get somebody pointing on the watch. That means that I need to close off. But he told me if I talk too long, people will leave anyway, but nobody is leaving. So should we ignore him? Should we take one more question?
You can stick around, Vincent, if people can chat.
I can stick around, so great.
Because I would like to give you a big hand of applause for coming here.
thank you very much for having me here. It was a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks.